Mentioned the president's post a moment ago. The AP's lead just now is Trump appears to rule out negotiations with Iran, says U.S. will help Iran rebuild after the war. Have we budgeted for that? And what does it do to domestic priorities?
I can't talk really about the timing of the war. That's something that's, ultimately the opponent needs to be surprised by, and the president needs to decide on his own. But the fact is, it's going way faster from my early briefings about what was going to happen and how it's going to affect the economy. It's going way faster. It has been way more successful than I expected just listening to the briefings. I think that the bottom line is that there's some disruption right now. But at the White House, we've got our eyes on the horizon. We believe that we're going to have a world with a much more stable Venezuela, a much more stable Iran, that is a very reliable and safe supplier of energy, which will reduce risk premiums around the world and be cause for celebration. And that horizon isn't really very far off, we don't believe.
Boy, that would be, I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit, that's a bit of a Pollyanna, but I think you meant it to be like, this is the best case possible. And I get that.
Okay. That's obviously Kevin Hassett, the director of the National Economic Council, this morning talk. I want to wrap your head around a lot what you just saw. And the reason I showed that instead of war footage, and I'll show that too, but I want you to think about what he just said. What he said is that Venezuela is going to be stable, Iran's going to be stable. What they're describing is killing and attacking and subjugating our economic opponents for a greater American future. Okay. If you put that in German, you might sound familiar. And the word Reich means kingdom or empire. Okay. And so what Kevin Hass is describing is that we're using our military with no congressional oversight, no authorization use of force, no reasoning, no public case made to the United States people or the Congress to attack people. And the good news is, folks, it's going to be so much better in the future. The economy is going to be stable. I mean, everybody remembers how when we went into Iraq, that it was going to be stable, that it was going to be a stable Middle East. That was the key to a stable Middle East. Sure, 25 years later, 23 years later, it's not a damn bit more stable, but that's because actually what the problem was Iran. But don't worry, because we're going to attack Iran, and then it's going to be more stable, and it's going to be a better future. This is just copy paste of the same stuff we've been hearing for 23 years. And it's the thing about is the economy is collapsing in real time as Trump attacks anyone who criticizes it and gleefully. The other thing that got me about that video, the reason I put it up, is did you see Hassett smiling? The creepy little smile, okay, the whole time. Hey, it's going to be a future. Look, I don't know how long the war is going to last, but it's not a war. Because if I say war, I need to go to Congress to declare war. So it might be, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, yeah, some troops might die, but that's okay. But luckily, the Department of Defense, it is the Department of Defense. That's their legal name. The Department of Defense is obviously taking this very seriously. We've got a very serious Secretary of Defense, don't we? I mean, watch his face. Now, I want to show you a video. Don't listen to words. Watch his face.
When we say more to come, it's more fighter squadrons, it's more capabilities, it's more defensive capabilities, and it's more bomber pulses more frequently. The amount of firepower over Iran and over Tehran is about to surge dramatically. And part of it is that we're going to have even more basing. And it's not just the UK. We've had other friends step up, and we're grateful for that. When we say more to come,
yeah, man, we're gonna have more bombs, more missiles. We're gonna bomb the heck out of them. Sure, an elementary school got hit, 150 girls got killed, but hey, look, it's cool, man. Look at so many bombs. It's so badass. And maybe our troops might die, and they have. Maybe Russia is helping Iran get their intelligence and targeting. But man, look at that smile. Pete is having the time of his life, y'all. But military families aren't. Okay? Military families aren't. And how do I know military families aren't? This is the most, so for those you don't know about my military career, for 18 years of my military career, I was an Army aviator, a combat helicopter pilot, matter of fact, which, by the way, our guest is too. I flew scouts during Desert Storm. I fought the last battle of Desert Storm. I was a lead scout for the Ramallah oil field battlefield. Got my Ranger tab. I flew Blackhawks in Iraq 1. And then after Iraq 1, General Petraeus decided I actually should be a spokesman for the Army. I actually went to our school very late in my career, learned how to be a public affairs officer. I did that for the last 4 years of my career. And we were trained how to, one of the biggest, most important duties of the United States military, I'm talking anyone in the military, especially the public affairs guys, was informing the public about the loss of our service members. This was, I think, the biggest block of instruction I received in that course I went to at Fort Meade, Maryland, was learning how to inform the public of our losses and the careful wording you had to use to inform the American public. Because by law, the United States military must inform the American public of losses. That's the law. It's a law, actually. And we have to inform them. And it has to be as fast as possible. This, ladies and gentlemen, ain't it. This is a press release from the Department of Defense. I don't care how many W's they put in it. It literally says DOW identifies an Army believed to be casualty. Okay, zoom in on that, Satchel. And it says the Department of Defense, it just says they announced the believed to be death of an Army Reserve soldier, and they named him by name. I want you to think about this. His family doesn't know the circumstances yet. His soldiers at home, this is reservists, they got commanders at home, don't necessarily know the circumstances. But these guys have just issued a press that says, hey, look, we think it's this guy, but we can't be sure. But here's his name. Now, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a family member desperately waiting for news of their family member who's downrange, who was in a command post that didn't have overhead protection. Even knowing we've been fighting Iranian drones, the Ukraine's been fighting Iranian drones for 3-4 years in Ukraine, even knowing we're fighting Iran, who makes the drones, the leadership of our DOD decided not to put overhead protection on a command post. It was attacked and 6 soldiers died. This is how they inform the public. DOW identifies as an Army believed to be casualty. This is how they treat our family members. This is just a big joke. And how do I know it's a big joke? Because Trump treats it like a joke. Here we go. Here's Trump. Here's Trump talking about the loss of our service members.
Even as we continue the righteous mission for which they gave their lives, we pray for the full recovery of the wounded and send our immense love and eternal gratitude to the families of the fallen. And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more, but
Okay. He's reading it. Couldn't even put a personal spin. He couldn't emote on his own. The President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, couldn't even find actual personal emotions. But when he did finally find some emotions, when he did riff at the end, it was to say, meh, there'll be more. That's what happens. That's the way it goes. Sorry, military family members. You might die. And as that guy, as a man who served, as a man who has had to sit across from widows of men I lost 35 years ago in Desert Storm, as the guy who wrote the press releases, which was the hardest job I had to do, believe it or not, was sitting in an office in a secure fob, writing a press release about one of our losses. And there were many I wrote about, talking to reporters about. I remember specifically one time being on the phone with Barbara Starr of CNN when she got my press release. And it was a full colonel of the United States Army. And had 3 kids at home. He was 2 weeks from going home. And Barbara Starr, a journalist, a professional journalist with 30 years working the Pentagon, was in tears talking about this guy's family. A reporter, one of the reporters that was kicked out of the Pentagon by Pete Hegseth because they're too woke. Okay. But the President of the United States, it happens. He doesn't feel the weight, doesn't feel the burden, doesn't feel any of it. Those of us who serve do. Those of us who have buried men and women do. It's called the mantle of leaders, the burden of leadership. And none of these people feel it. None of them. In the end, our veterans and our service members, we're going to come home. We're going to feel that burden. Some of us for the rest of our lives. And they don't care. You see 3 smiling faces on TV. Oh, future economy is going to be great. Oh, we're going to bomb the shit out of them. Oh, it happens. That's what we signed up for. But I got a great guest, as always, to talk about these things. My friend Kai is going to come. She's leading an incredible organization, the leading organization supporting Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. And we're going to talk about the fact that the deal is that this is a very big deal. I've talked to a lot of my fellow global war and terror veterans this week, a lot, and a lot are feeling it. Doesn't even matter what political side you're on. A lot are nervous. And the way our soldiers are being talked about, the way we're hearing rumors that apparently Russia is now helping Iran target us. They targeted a specific room in a hotel in UAE, targeting a specific room where a United States naval officer was staying, supposedly. That's what we saw this morning. They're trying to confirm that now. But according to reports, a specific room in a hotel was targeted in Bahrain by Iranian drones. Think about that. But hey, a greater economic future awaits, folks. We just got to get to this little part where we subjugate a country twice the size of Iraq. So I'm very serious in this one. It's a very serious conversation. I'm thrilled to have somebody I care very much who's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my veteran career, my military career, and is a leader in our community in ways I can't imagine. If I read her entire bio, we would be here in our 20 minutes. And so with that, let's kick off the show. I'm Fred Wellman. This is On Democracy with FP Wellman. I'm thrilled to have you guys with us. We got a lot to talk about this week, needless to say. So let's get on with the show. Okay, welcome. I am Fred Wellman. This is On Democracy with FP Wellman, still right here on the Midas Touch Network every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm so glad to have you with us. Those who wish to join us in the live chat, I'm thrilled to have you guys. Always, I love our Midas Mighty. I appreciate you so much. As always, thanks for following the show. Thanks for subscribing to our Substack, all the things you do. And as I mentioned, I have the perfect guest to talk about these very serious issues. And I love talking to friends. You know what? I always tell guests when they come on the show, you guys, that the format of our show, because what's the format show? The format of my show is two friends talking. And the best part of this format is that I actually get to have friends come on sometimes, and we're two friends talking. So with that, I want to welcome Dr. Kyle Hunter. She's the CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. She's truly a dedicated, lifelong servant and advocate. But more importantly for me, she's a Marine Corps veteran of both the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. She was an AH-1W Cobra pilot, and that's a badass job if you've ever had it. And so with that, Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here and actually talk to friends. It's wonderful.
Talk to friends. It's so great to have you. We were laughing at the pre-show because, like, what day is it? I mean, I don't know what day it is. I mean, you were literally on Capitol Hill this week testifying as part of the Veteran Service Organizations, their annual testimony, right? I mean, what's the mood? I mean, it's been quite a week. I'll start there. Like, what's the vibe check, if you will?
Yeah, it has been quite a week. So this week it is a annual tradition, something that's been going on for decades, where the veteran service organizations come and brief the House and Senate leadership together in joint hearings on policy priorities. And so you have organizations like VFW and the American Legion, us with Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, but also some of the more niche organizations, the folks like Blinded Veterans of America or Minority Veterans of America, right? And it is the time where thousands upon thousands of veterans come to the Hill to say, this is what we need, and don't forget about us. Because it has been a time, and I think, Fred, you know this, a lot of your viewers know this, 20 years ago, veterans were top of everyone's mind. We were embroiled in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The support our troops is everywhere. And, in the past decade or so, the American appetite for engaging with veterans has sort of waned. It's been easy to forget about the fact that we exist and we do have unique needs in terms of our healthcare, but also employment and education. And, I was talking to my policy director about this. My testimony was due to the committee a week before the briefing actually happened. And that's pretty normal. And I had intended to, I think, like the leaders of every veterans organization, really use this time to say, okay, if we're not embroiled in any wars, this is now a moment that we can sort of pause and take stock comprehensively of how we need to do things like reform healthcare at the VA. How do we need to modernize our GI bills, the VA home loan benefits? What do we need to do to ensure that we keep them up to date with today's housing market? Let's make sure we're doing oversight on the PACT Act, the Deborah Sampson Act, which improves access for women, right? It was really intended to be a time to say, all right, we now have some space to not be reactive to immediate needs, but let's work together pragmatically to ensure that veterans of 20 years at war are taken care of.
Right.
And so submitted my testimony. Everything was great, right? I was like, this is going to be a nice calm day.
Best laid
now-
plans.
Exactly. And I woke up at 5 a.m. Saturday morning and said, what? Just it's one of those days that I think a lot of us have them. We just wake up sort of very early, unexpectedly, as like something doesn't feel right. And I had woken up to text messages from several friends to say, what just happened? What just happened overnight?
Yeah.
And so the mood is tense among the veteran communities that was there, most of which are war veterans. We had 20 years of ongoing combat operations, and regardless of the organization that people are a part of, a not insignificant number had been part of the global war on terror. And there was a bit of almost at the beginning kind of catatonic feeling of like, do we really believe this? Is this real? Is this true? What's happening? But then it became very clear and much more needed that we are once again going to be having a generation of veterans who needs are going to be need to be met in real time. I think thinking back to our early days in Iraq and Afghanistan, there was so much that had to be done on how do we ensure the needs of veterans are met that have had significant changes to the types of injuries that we'd seen, right? We'd seen new types of injuries. How are we going to take care of military families that look different than military families in the Vietnam era? And now once again, we're met with the exact same questions. The types of casualties and injuries that we're going to see in however this war unfolds are going to be different. We have a adversary that has a very, very sophisticated cyber capability as well. And so when we think about what the secondary implications are, that it's not just going to be someone got shot in the leg, there's going to be hugely different types of injuries that may not be physical, right? We're gonna have potential huge financial implications to people if we start engaging in cyber war.
Yeah.
The Iranians as well have great developments in artificial intelligence. And what does this mean for mis and disinformation for people in the region, our friends in the region, the way that our current members of the armed forces and veterans are going to be targeted and attacked. So we are entering into a time where there are once again more questions than answers, but a very, very immediate need that we're making a whole new generation now of active combat veterans, and we need to be there to support them and to really lean in on that front side.
And that's it. Here we are again, and they're trying to deny it's a war. Yesterday, the House rejected a war powers resolution that was written. I mean, I think I've had a lot of arguments with folks like, oh, the favorite one I get online a lot is like, oh, you weren't mad when Obama and Biden is like, yeah, because they had the post 9/11, they were covered by the law. All we're saying is, I want you to go to Congress or the public, the American public, and make your case for war. I was going to show a video of Elbridge Colby, who is the undersecretary for policy when he appeared before Congress, and they were trying to grill him on answers, and he had none because he wasn't involved in this. It's clear he wasn't involved. That this is, the week before the war, and it's a war. What was Hegseth focused on? The Boy Scouts DEI programs and attacking the Ivy League, and of course working out the bros. I mean, why is this significant for our viewers to understand why we're asking for an AUMF? Why are we asking for them to make the case? Because I think for me, and I want to speak for you, for me, it's like, you need to explain to me why we're sending our sons and daughters to war. And it's a war, right? I mean, where do you fall on that?
Yeah, and so this is something that both at IAVA has been very, very involved with for a long time, and myself and my own research I did even before
Yeah.
I came here,
Yeah.
is the importance of Congress holding the ability to declare war. And I think a lot of IAVA members were upset at Obama and Biden.
Yeah.
Yes, they were legally covered through the AUMFs, and there are executive abilities to use military in very limited cases, and those are all covered by the executive war powers. However, for those that were downrange and know the consequences of being in combat, it doesn't matter what you call it, right? It doesn't
Right.
matter if you call it a war or don't call it a war. The families of those dead soldiers, it was a war, right?
Right.
The 150 potentially the numbers I've seen are sort of all over the place, right? Of girls who died by going to school, tell their families that this isn't a war. And so for those who have spent time engaged in combat action, ensuring that this decision is met with gravity is given time to be debated, to be fleshed out, to understand, is this the right actions that we should take? Because they're irreversible. You
Right.
can't, there's no oopsies when it comes to
Right.
fighting a war. And there are plans that are made, and there are people who for decades strategize as to what we should do in given different circumstances. You know, when I sat inside that five-sided building, worked on some of
Yes, you did.
these potential plans, right, in terms of
So did I.
how they may play out, right? And it's very, very serious. And
Yeah.
it should be a, I don't like using the term last resort because it's not always the last resort, but should be a seriously deliberated resort. And Congress, it is very clear in the Constitution that Congress has the power to declare war. Congress needs to be engaged and informed. And that's because the American people need to have a say as well.
Right.
The American people, if we are sending our sons and daughters to go out and potentially fight and potentially die, there needs to be buy-in. This is not something, this is one of the things that in my political science putting hat back on, is supposed to differentiate democracies in that the people have a say, because it is very, very serious to choose to go to war. And so for our membership, again, the majority of whom did serve in the conflicts related to the global war on terror, if their names Iraq and Afghanistan veterans of America, we have folks who are in Syria, who are in the Horn of Africa, right? Big GWAT post 9/11
Yeah.
time. They know just how serious this is, and they know that it should not be done as a whim or with a smile. And I think I look at some of the differences, even going back to thinking in the post 9/11 era, that both of you and I remember 9/11, right? We were both in the uniform
Yep.
on 9/11, and just how grave and serious and somber the president, the
Yes.
secretary of defense, the secretary of state, Speaker of the House, everyone was when they talked about this issue. They did not talk about it cavalierly.
No.
They did not talk about it as a thing that they want to just go drop more bombs.
Right.
It spoke very plainly, that America had been attacked. We're going to go have to do very hard things to address that, but it was done in a way that was appropriate, right? The response was measured. The response gave hope and faith to military families that this decision was made deliberately and seriously, and that those who were in charge understood, right? Understood the gravity of what they are doing. And I think, for us to talk about this isn't a partisan issue, right? There was a Republican administration,
Right.
and they did it the right way, right?
Right.
And it's something that, post 9/11, I think anyone would have done, right? But there was not a cavalier attitude taken in the aftermath of 9/11. And that is, the cavalierness with which use of force decisions are made is very personal and weighs very heavy on, I think, anyone, regardless of, again, political affiliation, because we hear that as well. Our membership
Yeah.
is very reflective of
Oh, yeah.
the general population. We have about a third of our members self-identify as Republican, about a third self-identify as Democrat, and about a third self-identify as I don't want to be part of any political party. And that middle growing. And I think with that, right, like more and more veterans don't want to be a part of any of it, right? They don't want to deal with how Biden botched the withdrawal and are really upset about that. They are upset about Obama's continual drone strikes and his sort of increased use of that. They are just as upset about cavalier attitudes about going to war in Iran right now. And so they say there needs to be a different way, right? So when we talk about our membership, they are very, very diverse and very reflective of the American public. And across the board, we're hearing a lot of concerns.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I think for me too is the layering of what we've seen as veterans after the war. And we know the long tail of war is how we take care of our veterans for decades and years. My father was a World War II vet. His father was a World War I vet who ended up dying very young of ostensibly lung cancer. we know that a lot of the illnesses don't. Hey, I always tell my if you follow me from long, you know I've been very open about my PTSD journey. I'm very open about the fact that it didn't come home to roost till about 7 years after I left the army, when things really got rough. I mean, these things aren't like, oh, at this day, these are all the things wrong with you. There are long-term, the illnesses from our exposure to burn pits haven't revealed themselves for years. You know, the toxic fumes. I mean, again and again, there's a long tail to war that affects all the people, right? And we're seeing right now, what I'm seeing is a direct assault on that once again, that Doug Collins is over at the VA very quietly. And there's just no question in my mind. And I know I don't want to put you on the spot, but dismantling the VA in every way. They've cut jobs. He's quietly, he smiles us and gives the all shucks. Everything's great. But you and I know there's real, like the VA veterans ourselves are not being involved in this conversation, are they?
No, and that's one of our biggest concerns. And put him on the spot. I've testified about this 4 or 5 times in the past month, so I'm pretty much on public record,
Yeah.
engaging that everyone, and I will say, look at this, right? We all know the VA needs to be reformed. It has been needed to be reformed for decades.
Always.
There's no question, right? There, and it can
No.
always be better. We
Always.
also know that the VA provides better care at a more effective cost in a more culturally competent way to veterans than the private sector does. That is
Right.
just and this is particularly true for women and women veterans, because when I go out, if I go out to see a civilian provider, I am never once asked if I'm a veteran. It has never happened to me that a civilian provider says like, "Hey, did you serve in the military?" Because I apparently don't look like a veteran, right? Maybe I should start wearing one, or I'm old enough. It's great. I can wear my GWAT hat, so I can be like, here I am. And
They'll still ask if it's your husband, Kai. They'll still say, "No, is your husband served?"
well,
It's nice you support your husband. Like, yeah.
and and as a survivor of multiple cancers, most of which we don't see in people that are under the age of like 85 or 90.
Yeah.
Right. The only reason I was able to be screened and evaluated for these cancers is because the VA said, "Hey, let's look at your service record. Like not only service in Iraq and Afghanistan, but also flying aircraft at times when we continue to prove this aircraft survivability equipment. And we are around jet fuel, which turns out breathing a lot of jet fuel is not the best thing
Who knew?
for you.
Who knew?
Who knew that inhaling, lots of fumes is not the best thing?"
Yep.
And so we need, like, the VA matters. And what we're seeing right now is under the auspices of we need to change, which again, we do. Things are happening without including veterans and the veterans community. And just recently we saw there was a rule published a few weeks ago
Yeah.
that would have changed the way that veteran benefits are allocated. No veteran organization was consulted for this. Not one. Not us, not the VFW, not the American Legion. There was not a comprehensive research done on the topic to come to this conclusion. There was very large unified veteran outcry that this had happened. The VA received tens of thousands, and I've heard upwards of 100,000 in some cases, of public comments from veterans about how this was going to harm them. And ultimately, the VA ended up rescinding their rule change, which is the right outcome. But that antidote is really indicative of what we've seen of things sort of happening quietly. And it's not just that they're excluding veterans from this conversation, which is very tragic,
Yep.
wrong. They're not including the research community in this, who comes and says, like, our independent organizations, like, my alma mater, RAND, and many of these academic institutions whose job is to do policy research, right? To say, like, hey, here's how you should probably engage in new policies, because we do want to ensure our policies are up to date. They're also not engaging Congress.
Right.
When we were at the HVAC DAMA, which oversees benefits hearings, Chairman Luttrell was asking them time and time, when are we going to see your proposed updates? What is your timeline and process? And the VA hasn't responded. I was meeting with him yesterday.
Luttrell, who is a MAGA Republican. I mean, let's be very clear who Marcus Luttrell is. Luttrell is a MAGA, hardcore MAGA Republican and a combat veteran, to his credit, and he can't get answers from the MAGA Republican VA. I mean, that's the thing.
Well, and I met with him yesterday, and I asked the staff, I'm like, have you gotten any updates from the questions you asked on the hearings? And they said, nope, and we're probably not going to. And so it is this, there's been a continued push to do things a little shadily and a little bit in the dark. And the ultimately who gets hurt from this are the veterans. They're the
Right.
ones who get harmed from not being able to have access to their benefits, but more importantly, not being able to be involved in the process.
And there's not that many of us. I mean, people ask me all the time, there's what I think we're down to 13 million now, right? I think is it
Mhm.
13? The
It's right around
17
13 million.
Yeah, it's right around 13 million. We're hemorrhaging that because the Korea War veterans now are dying off. Now we're at the point where Vietnam War veterans are passing away from old age. When I first started my firm, when you and I first met back in 2010, when I first started Scout Comms, my veterans advocacy firm that I owned for a decade, it was, I want to say 16 million, no, 18 million. And we were losing at one point 30,000 veterans a month of World War II and Korea at that point. Now we're down to 13 million 10 years later. We're not creating the kind of numbers as these veterans age. And then that adds all those other issues of aging and the challenge we have. And to dismiss that community, which isn't that big. The Major Richard Starr Act got rejected again. I was laughing with you because one of my followers sent me the press release your organization did about the Richard Starr Act. It's 50,000 people. That's all it is, right? And tell what this means, Richard Starr Act, why
Yeah.
it matters.
So the Major Richard Starr Act, which is an act that has been sort of in the wings for a long time, for years.
Forever since I had Scout Comms. I mean, it's been 6 years, you know?
And it has overwhelming bipartisan support. And so what this does, there's this very wonky term called concurrent receipt, but effectively what it does is it robs medically retired veterans of their retirement. Because so what it right now, the way it stands is if you are medically retired, which means that you had a illness or injury that the Department of Defense deemed makes you ineligible for military service, right? So these are people, everything from those that have, catastrophically lost limbs to those that develop cancers that are unique to those who come down with autoimmune disease. Like when we're talking about the PACT Act, we haven't even talked about huge rise of autoimmune disorders that we're seeing that aren't cancers, that aren't lung disease, but are things that we're like, where are these coming from? Why they are, right? So if you are injured or get an illness to the extent that the military says you cannot serve anymore, and we are going to medically retire you. This is not saying you're getting kicked out. We are saying rather than you having to wait out your 20 years, we're saying that whether it's 4 years or 14 years, you got to know, but you are retired. You're not being discharged.
Right.
You have to choose between getting your retirement pay and or your VA disability pay. And this is wrong because these are two different buckets of money, right? Retirement pay is effectively a pension for serving time that is administered through the Department of Defense that they say this is your, like, you put your time in, we are now paying you a stipend for retiring because you put your time in, right?
I'm retiring.
Yes. Your VA compensation and pension is a payment based on the fact that it's really twofold. One, we broke you, right? We harmed you, and ergo, you have limitations on your ability to work on the outside world. So there's a piece of it that is you're basically a financial incentive for work and time lost and like an inability to work. But it also exists because there's a law referred to as the Ferris Doctrine that the individuals who serve in the U.S. military cannot sue the government like you'd be able to sue workers' comp, right? So if you get hurt on the job in a civilian job, your employers carries workers' comp insurance,
Right.
That is because you got hurt. You sue them because you got hurt. There's a settlement, and the settlement is here's a load of cash, right, for getting hurt on the job. You and I can't sue
Nope.
the U.S. government for the fact that neither of us can hear anything because we spent thousands of hours flying helicopters that damaged our ears, right? We can't sue,
Railroaders.
right? So a piece of that was, okay, we will give a compensation, which is effectively also an admission that, like, yes, we hurt, and this is part of a settlement. So these are two very different pots of money that exist. This only impacts about 50,000 people, but for those 50,000 people,
50,000.
it is life-saving. And the amount of additional money a month isn't that much. It's on average a few hundred to maybe $1,000 a month for the individuals who, and that's not much for the U.S. government. I want to
No,
it's not much.
drop in the bucket for the U.S. government.
That is life-saving and life-changing for the individuals who need it, right? That is, and I mean, Fred, you know this from all the work that you're doing campaigning right now. An additional $500 a month for so many families is the difference between keeping their heat on and off in the winter. It is the difference between providing, you know, food for their family every day of the week. It is the difference between, making the decision between, am I going to get gas to get my car to get to work, or am I going to get the medication that I need, right? Because those are
Survival or
the-
despair,
yeah,
homelessness or not homeless. I mean, that is the cut line for the majority of who we're talking about here. It's
and it was, when I was sitting in the joint chamber today, we had, Mark Takano, who is the ranking member of the House Veteran Affairs Committee, and Senator Blumenthal, who is the ranking member of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. They both pledged that this would get a vote this Congress again. And actually, that day, they left that hearing, and Senator Blumenthal went to the Senate floor and asked for unanimous consent to move the Richard Starr Act to a vote. Right? Just said, and he didn't even say everybody needs to support the bill. He said,
no.
I need unanimous consent to bring this up for a vote.
Yep.
And one senator said, nope, we don't even want to vote on this. And that is,
Ron Johnson. I'll say it.
yeah, Ron Johnson.
Republican Ron Johnson, who's never served. Ron Johnson.
Yeah. And he didn't even, and what?
No explanation, right?
No explanation, has avoided every question. He has been asked it directly, and he will not say why. But I think to hammer home, and I think a lot of your viewers probably know this because you're an engaged community, but unanimous consent just means we're bringing this to the floor so we can debate it.
Right.
It says we are going to move this from committee because it has passed out of committees. It has passed out of the House and Senate committees. It is ready to hold a vote. All that needs to be done, and this is something that Blumenthal coordinated with both the Senate majority and minority leaders, and they said, yes, let's bring it forward. Even Chairman Moran, who's the chairman of the Senate, talked to Blumenthal and said, this was your bill, so you are the one who should introduce it, not because of partisan politics. Like, I will say, on the Senate side, Moran and Blumenthal work together incredibly, incredibly well. They have been a very, they still keep the spirit that the point is to help our veterans, right? And we couldn't even get it by one person. One individual said, this bill shouldn't even be debated. That we are not going to give these people the dignity to put the bill on the floor to debate the bill. And that is wrong.
And again, it's the classic thing. It's like, and by the way, for context, as that's unfolding, we were spending at least $1 billion a day on a new war, which we're just casually doing. We're using $4 million missiles to shoot down $50,000 drones, but we can't spare the money to take care of the people that were injured when they missed that damn drone. And we do know from the attack we mentioned at the top of the hour about the soldiers that were killed in that command post in Kuwait. There's multiple injuries. I think I read 16 injuries from that one incident. They're very well going to get retired, and they'll fall under this act. And we can't even get a senator to admit why they don't want to do it. That they're going to save money on our backs. And I get mad. It's just, it makes no sense.
It's not, and I think even at this point, this is just a debate. Is the bill perfect? No. Right? But it needs to, let's bring it to the floor, have a debate, improve it, raise your concerns with the bill on the floor in public, because we need to know, right? We deserve to know where, because maybe he has some great way to fix the bill. That would be wonderful. Come bring it to the floor. Let's fix it. Like, there are issues, and but I think this hints at something that's become a bigger problem and a bigger concern that I'm having very, very big concerns on now that we're making a whole lot of more veterans, is what we've seen, unfortunately, is this habit. So there's another very wonky term on the Hill referred to as pay-fors, right? Which basically says bills need to be budget neutral, right? And what we've seen, unfortunately, is that in creating these pay-fors, we're pitting groups of veterans against each other.
There you go.
And that's also wrong, right? There are other more creative ways that we can look at paying for these things that aren't saying this group of veterans is better than that group of veterans. We've seen this, and we saw it in an attempt to pit the paralyzed veteran community against the trans veteran community, which thankfully both communities rejected that notion and said, no, we're not going to be pit against each other. Right now, we're seeing it with catastrophically wounded veterans getting actually pit against active duty because of the way that they're trying to use the fees, increase the fees for VA home loans for individuals that don't have service-connected disability ratings. Well, you know who those individuals are? They are your young active duty service members who don't have a disability rating yet because they haven't been hurt. And that's great. But we also know that being able to buy a home early on in your military career is one of the top ways of getting people out of poverty. Right? We know, right? The number one way to create intergenerational wealth is through home ownership.
Yep.
The VA loan allows for individuals who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford purchasing a home to buy a home much earlier, right? And you talk to just about anyone in the military, or not just about anyone, a good significant number of people in the military, right? The VA home loan is the way they were able to buy their first house.
Oh, almost all of us. Yeah, I mean, it is.
And,
know,
and
By the way,
it-
in the middle class, I grew up in a house bought by a VA home loan because my dad was a World War II veteran.
and that's why when they talk about the boomer generation and their ability to do well, what it had to do with the fact that a lot of them had VA home loans and could go
Still a VA home loan. That is
Go buy a home
everybody
right
on earth. You talk about data a lot. We were talking about data before this. There's data that shows this is a big part of where we are as a country. Creating a middle class was through these opportunities. And they're rolling. I think this is something I say a lot, Kai, is so many empowered today have done very well for themselves, and good on them, right? I have someone I'm very involved with right now who's done very well in Congress, but the role and the ladder up behind him for the people, everyone, but especially for us veterans. And you just said it right there. It's like the idea of denying young service members or any service members the ability to buy a home now, a basic thing. And it's just a home loan guarantee. It gets you out of a down payment because it's guaranteed by the government. Most of us don't foreclose. I mean, even when I was in my worst financial troubles, I was able to sell my house. I've never, it's just.
And I mean, that's another big part. Like the default rate on VA home loans is very, very low.
Astonishing.
And it's also because of, for those that are in the military, they have a guaranteed paycheck. You know what their paycheck is going to be, right? Like, and you can't go above and beyond, right? Like you can't qualify in a home above your means. And in the veteran community, same thing, right? Veterans have better employment outcomes than their non-veteran peers. And so this is a great guarantee, but I think it goes to the fact of like pitting veterans against each other.
Yeah.
Creates inappropriate infighting, whereas we know where the data lead us is that it's a rising, rising tides lift all ships, right? If we support our most catastrophically wounded veterans, we end up improving everyone's lives in the process.
Well, I we could go on. I have some more questions. I know you got to go do like important stuff. Having said that, tell us about IAVA, where you guys are, where people can find more about IAVA. What are your priorities right now? You guys are battling. I think we talked about a lot of them already. Before I let you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't let you plug your organization and the hard work they're doing.
Absolutely. So IAVA is IAVA.org, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. You don't need to be a veteran to join, but we love when all veterans do join, and it is free. We are not a membership dues organization, but we are a membership-driven organization, meaning that we set our policy priorities based on the feedback from our members as to what they care about the most. And we just actually wrapped up a big policy priority survey and rolled out our 5 new big policy priorities, which are improving and modernizing healthcare access. I mean, this is probably not surprising across America right now. Healthcare access is one of the most important things that people are engaging with. We're looking at economic support and empowerment, making it easier to do skills transfers from military life into civilian life as a key part, right? Jobs.
Yep.
Because we're working quite a bit with the military healthcare community on this right now. There's huge nursing shortages, rural doctor shortages, and just make it easier for those that were trained in the medical profession in the military to translate those skills into the communities that need them the most. We're working a lot with our Afghan allies. In the midst of everything happening right now, we didn't even touch on the fact that the very people that we abandoned in 2021 in Afghanistan, when we started moving through this process of special immigrant visas, they're all on a base in Qatar right now that is getting attacked. And so we have now we put these people in harm's way twice, left them for death threats by the Taliban. Now where they are is where they are getting attacked by Iran. And this is something that when we talk about, Fred, you had mentioned like PTSD flaring up later. Earlier this year, we did a flash poll around Afghan allies. This is when Afghans were getting detained by ICE, and 3/4 of our members said that this was the most significant moral injury that they had experienced since the war, was seeing our allies, people who put their lives and their families' lives on the line to support us. So they're a big priority. And right now, again, the way this is done, we're going to need Iranians to help us. We are going to need people in Gulf states to help us. And if we don't honor this promise, who's going to want to help us in the long run? Additionally, a lot of work around women veterans. And what I will say is this is not just a women's veterans issues. When we do our survey and our polling, again, over 3/4 of men, and I'll say straight white male veterans, say ensuring equity for women veterans is one of the most important things that we can do. Women are the fastest growing group of veterans. Women have unique health care issues. And just about every man who served in Iraq and Afghanistan served pretty close with a woman and couldn't have done their job without a woman, right? Without a woman there.
They're integral for my work.
Your work would be, and they are all of these talks of like great recruiting numbers coming out. You know who's driving those? Women. You look at our country right now, in every single state, women are more eligible for military service than men based on their physical health, based on their academic standing, based on their legal records and engagement, right? So this is a population that we are not going to be able to do any of these things without. So ensuring that women, and surprise, surprise, we have different healthcare needs than men. Here's something else I've
got daughters.
Yeah. There's things that are different, but also different just social cycle engagements. There was when we're talking about benefits and modernizing benefits, the Congressional Budget Office did a study a few years ago that was looking at VA benefits and employment earnings and like offsets and where there are disparities and not disparities. You know how many data on women veterans was included in that study? 0.
Yeah.
Not one. They only looked at male veterans, right? So this is
I literally get a headache. It's just, and meanwhile, of course, we've got Pete Hegseth attacking their service, questioning their service, questioning. I mean, I'm not going to forget the F-15, one of the weapons service officer, the pilot, parachuting down to a beach in Kuwait and saying, "I'm good, thanks. No worries." It's like they serve.
They're doing a
I
job.
served under the command. I served under the command of women. I served next to women.
Mhm.
We're equal, and then it is what it is. It's just another example of the disconnect between these who are supposedly the leaders and the actual people they're being led, and their families too. So, well, I really appreciate you guys doing the work. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was saying that led to our last priority, which is really on improving civic engagement, and that includes ensuring the military is a place that everyone can serve, everyone who's eligible to get out there serve, but also improving access to voting rights, improving getting veterans into local, state, federal areas, because we know veterans have a easier time working together as well. And I think we talked about this a little bit at the beginning with the way that we've had some great relationships with Luttrell, with Rep. Luttrell, who is still at the end of the day, let's put veterans first and let's fix our problems.
Yeah. Well, that's the gospel.
Doing that across the aisle.
It's about time, and we've seen such disconnect lately, and it's not getting any better. So, man, Kai, thank you for this. I really appreciate your time. I could talk for a whole hour and a half still. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the work you guys are doing, and your fellows VSOs up at Capitol Hill. I'm watching from a distance now from St. Louis, but I appreciate you guys, the hard work you do for all of us. And like you said, we now have a new generation of veterans from a whole new war. It doesn't matter what they call it. We know what they are. So I appreciate putting the work in for them too. So hang in there, sister. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could talk to Kai all day. I won't belabor the points anymore at this point. It was a great show, great conversation. As you can see, we face a very serious moment in our country, and we need serious leaders. You heard this conversation for the last 45 minutes. These are very serious things for our sisters and our brothers. I didn't even get to the part that Kai and I had the pleasure and the duty and the honor to serve with Kai for Brady, the organization for gun violence. And while we were together right before the pandemic working there, it was to figure out the data and the science and ways to prevent veteran suicide from guns. Because the number one tool that veterans use to take their own lives are weapons. Of course, we're familiar with guns. And we found through studies, data, because she's a scientist, she is a PhD. We found through data that you could break that cycle. For example, having a weapon locked in it and having ammo separate would break the suicide cycle, and it would stop a suicide act possibly. All these things, we do the research, we do the work, and then we take care of our service members and our veterans. And this administration currently doesn't seem to care. They're smiling as they drop bombs. They're laughing about the idea that, people are going to die. Whoopsie. There's no whoopsie for those of us who serve. Okay? There just isn't. We live with this the rest of our lives. I am that guy. I still feel the burden of sending Mike and Hal off to combat, off to a mission that I was supposed to fly, and them not coming back. It weighs on my shoulders for the rest of my life till I'm dead and buried in Arlington Cemetery. I will never forget the decision that I made that sent men to their lost. It was the right decision. It was the right mission. They belonged there. But that's war. I want leaders that feel that. And smirking your way through a press conference, putting out press releases that are disastrous for the families, shows these are not serious people. And we deserve better. Your next chance is the midterms, because we're going to have elections. Get out there. Change the direction of this country. It's in your hands. I'm Fred Wellman. This is On Amongst the FP Wellman every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, right here in the My Substack Network. I just appreciate you guys being here. As always, follow our Substack, fpwellman.substack.com. I got that other thing I'm doing. You can find out all of that at fpwellman.substack.com. I'd love to see you there. In the meantime, please take care of our military families. Keep them in your prayers. Keep them in your thoughts. Understand that this is high pressure from us. This is a very dangerous time. And then people who got their loved ones downrange or wherever they may be, preparing to go downrange, even in peacetime, it's a dangerous business. It just got worse. Keep them in your thoughts and prayers. I'd appreciate that as a military family member, as a veteran. With that, I'll see you guys next week. Same place, same time. Thanks for everything you do for our country.